you so much for coming this evening. I'm Sarah Jones, and this is my brother Caleb. We're the co-owners of Jones Gallery. We just recently opened on, well, it's been about a month and a week or so, which would be 5 weeks. Math. I know, it's been a long time, Mr. Gahagan, my former physics teacher. Yes, and so when I told Caleb my background is art history. I graduated from Queens with a graduate degree in art history about 10 years ago now. Oh my goodness, time goes by. And I told Caleb I teach at the university sometimes. I said, oh, we should do some lectures here at the gallery and we'll see if there's any response. And I was like, maybe we should get about 10 chairs, that'll be fine. But anyway, this is really, really wonderful and gratifying to see all of you here tonight to learn about art and talk about art history. So, Hieronymus Bosch, oh boy, Fornication and giant strawberries is going to be quite the night. Hang on to your hats. I'm sorry. That's right. That's what you learn at Jones Gallery, eh? Oh boy. No wonder it's so full. So what my plan is for the evening, I'll tell you a bit about Bosch and how he fits into the Northern Renaissance and what the purpose is of his work and some of the interpretations around his work and, like I said, how he fits in. And then we'll spend most of our night dissecting this one particular triptych, this one particular painting. So Bosch is one of those artists who has his symbols and various images from his paintings have crept into our modern sort of ephemeral, it's always in our peripheral vision, Bosch. And so we're often familiar with bits and pieces of his paintings. This is actually a detail from one of his other famous triptychs, The Temptation of St. Anthony, which I love. We might do that another night. There's some real debauchery and weird stuff in that one. Like this. I love his ears. This popped up on my Facebook feed a few months ago, well, around Halloween, of course. This brilliant individual riding around the New York subway. Yes, in a Bosch-inspired costume. Art history students, yeah. So you've probably seen some of the images that you'll see tonight, and some of the details from the works will look familiar to you. Like I said, it pops up on album covers and in Halloween and all over the place. And I think that's partly why his work he's not one of the most famous painters from the Renaissance. We think of Leonardo and Michelangelo, and Bosch is, like I said, a little more on the periphery, but there is kind of this mystique around him and his work because of things like this. The flying fish, what is going on? That's another bit from St. Anthony. You'll have to come back for another time. This is something we'll look at tonight, the weird and wonderful world of Hieronymus Bosch. So this is a portrait of Bosch. Those are his dates, roughly, that we think we know. There was a humanist writer and a philosopher named Dominicus Lampsonius. Great name. Dominicus Lampsonius. And he believed that the artist and the artwork were connected, so that a happy artist would paint happy, beautiful images, and that a gloomy artist would create melancholy work. And then, of course, he came to Bosch, and Bosch's paintings are rife with fairly disturbing imagery, and he was known as a fantastical chronicler of demons and hell. He was like if you wanted somebody to paint hell, you went to Bosch during the 1400s and 1500s. And Lampsonius's theory on Bosch was that he must hang out with demons. This is where he's getting, look at the demonic nature of his work. And this is something that artists have had to deal with, this idea, this Renaissance idea, that there is a direct connection between the work and the artist. That took root, like I said, in the 1500s, and it's something that we still deal with, that I deal with it. I paint some gloomy industrial landscapes, and people say, well, you're not a gloomy person. Where is this coming from? I'm like, oh, Lampsonius, making this connection here. So there was the idea about Bosch and kind of the mystique that, oh, he was a worshiper of Satan, or that he made trips to the underworld, or that he had these deep, dark, nightmarish communes with demons and with the devil. Sprung up also lots of kind of ideas in the mythology around Bosch as an individual, that he was a member of satanic sects, that there were hidden codes and messages for Satan worshipers in his paintings, and that he must be some kind of fantastical or strange person himself, when actually Bosch was kind of boring. We don't know a whole lot about his early life. He spent actually the majority of his life, he didn't travel much. He spent it in Bosch, which is in the Burgundian Netherlands. So in the Renaissance, there was this Burgundian Empire, which took in, Burgundy, obviously, Burgundian Empire, but present day Luxembourg, Belgium, and the Netherlands. And this was really the center of the Northern Renaissance. So when you think of artists like Van Eyck or Van der Weyden, this is where they're centered in the Burgundian Empire. And Bosch is a boring town. Not much went on there, and that's where Bosch spent most of his life. I mean, it was well-to-do enough, but it's not Bruges, party on in Bruges. It was a fairly calm and respectable city from our estimation. Bosch was probably from a family of painters. We have some records of that. It seems like his uncle painted, and his father, perhaps. He was one of 5 children. I think the fourth of 5th. Anyway, 4th of 5. Anyway, but other than that, we don't know a whole lot about him. The major event, which seems to have informed his work in Bosch, there was a massive fire in 1463. And so Bosch would have been an early teenager. And this fire decimated, rampaged through the city. And we believe it burned down Bosch's parental home. And there are these fires, these often in his depictions of hell, there are these absolutely terrifying nighttime scenes of cities on fire. And so that's one kind of psychological insight that historians perhaps feel safe in making. So we don't think he belonged to any satanic sects, but we know that he did witness this great fire in his city, and it informs his depictions of hell throughout his life. Let me just go back. Talk about Bosch again. He was relatively well-off, well-to-do. He was well-collected in his lifetime. His paintings were popular. The one we're going to be discussing tonight, The Garden of Earthly Delights, was, we think, a wedding gift to, I know, right? Have fun, but not too much fun. So we'll talk more about that and the implications of that as a wedding gift. But it was given to a prince or a count in Brussels. And so he was very well collected, and his work quickly spread throughout all of Europe, and he had lots of copiers and followers There was a school of Bosch after his death where his work was widely copied. So he was doing just fine. He married up. He climbed the social status, so he married really well, which is good. Good for Bosch. As an artist, good plan. No. And like I said, he spent most of his life in this small part of the Netherlands. What's key to understanding the work of Bosch, and I'll frame this up for you, and then you'll see it as we carry on and talk about the Garden of Earthly Delights. There are two things, there are two aspects traditions that Bosch is working in. And this idea of fantastical creatures and strange demons and combinations of animals and humans and fantastical creatures is rooted in a medieval tradition of the grotesque and the drollery. And so we see that there are these sources. I think I took this photo is from Paris somewhere. I can't remember where. Anyway, if you've ever been to Europe and have you seen any kind of Gothic architecture, there are these grotesque and strange little sculptures that populate every kind of small surface. So they're not the central figures, but in all of the tucked away places will be filled with these strange creatures. And some of them, they're delightfully imaginative. And then also there's a tradition of drolleries, and drolleries are combinations of human and animal forms. And they pop up quite often in the margins of illuminated manuscripts. So Bosch is pulling on these ideas of the drollery and the grotesque. I love it. Killer rabbits, Monty Python. You wonder where the killer rabbits come from? It's just Google violent medieval rabbits. There's a whole wealth of stuff out there doing all kinds of things. And so there's this tradition in illumination of medieval manuscripts of flipping the world on its head, creating this kind of topsy-turvy, upside-down world in which, again, there's that combination, the drollery, the combination of a human form with an animal, a snail. Bad choice for a joust, I think, personally. But yes, the rabbits engaged in, and there's all kinds of rabbits carrying humans on kind of spits, and they're going to roast the humans and eat them up, or rabbits hunting humans. And that pops up again and again in Bosch's work. One thing I will say about Bosch, and what we can infer from his work, is that he was a learned individual. He was an erudite. He would have spent time with these type of manuscripts, and there were well-established convents and monasteries in Hertogenbosch, and they would have had vast collections of these type of manuscripts, and he would have spent time there absorbing that. And there's a vast array of literary and pictorial references in his work, and he would have been. We can see from his work that he is very, very familiar with the Christian humanist teaching of the Renaissance. So this is a learned individual that we're dealing with. Let's get to the Fornication. Here we go. So we think this was executed around 1503. It's currently in the Prado in Madrid, in Spain, the Prado collection. I'll tell you how it wound up there shortly. But I included this image to give you a sense of the scale. I think scale is always important. When you see it up on the screen, it's always, paintings you imagine large are always like this, and the paintings you imagine, anyway. So this is about, it's about 1.5 meters high by about 3 meters. It's what we call a triptych. So there are 3 panels, and it actually folds shut. So this is what is on the exterior shutters. So it folds like this, and that's why they probably have it so you can walk around a bit and see the back. So it would be folded up, and then for special occasions in the court of Henry III of Nassau, which I'll tell you about in a moment, it would be unfolded for, like I said, for special occasions. So this is the closed shutters. And then this is the interior view. And what we have are four, this looks really daunting. We will break it down. It will make sense. I know it seems like a vast array of bewildering figures and images. Like, how will we ever? There's an art historian, I forget who it was right now, but he had this great idea or great analysis of Bosch. He was like, it's just too complicated. There's too much stuff going on. I'm just going to skip it. Anyway, we'll dig in, and this will all become clear shortly. But there are four interconnected scenes on the shutter panel. This is the third day of creation. It's all of these scenes are sourced. There's a textual references for all of these scenes in the Bible. So this is the third day of creation. Oops, wrong way. And then on the inside, the first panel is a scene from the Garden of Paradise. And this is the creation of Eve, and Christ is giving Eve to Adam. And then in the center panel, this is the world before the flood. So this is just before Noah and the ark and everybody dies with the flood. Hell. And they're all, like I said, interconnected. There's an eschatological theme driving all of this. So it all has to do with the destiny of humankind and the fate of our soul. There was a tradition, it actually dates back to Horace, the Roman poet Horace. And he wrote that art should amuse but also benefit the audience. And so the idea, it's called docare et delectare. So docare means to instruct, and delectare means to delight. And that is really what is underpinning Bosch's approach here. So I think we're all drawn in by all the stuff, the juicy bits going on in the giant fruit, which would have been common to Bosch's contemporaries, and when the role that this work would have served in the court of Henry III. And so there was actually a contemporary, the first textual reference we have, or record we have of the Garden of Earthly Delights was in 1517. There was an Italian who was traveling through to the court of Henry III in Brussels, and he wrote about how he saw Bosch's work, and he thought it was great, and there are cranes excreting people into a pit of despair, and all kinds of fantastical creatures and unicorns, and isn't it just great? So he picked up on the delectare part, so he picked up on the astonishment and the delight. And then about a century later, another observer looked at it a little more closely and picked up, this is Jose de Siguenza, and he noticed that there was a moral message here. So it's quite complicated, and it's all about, again, like the fate of humanity and our soul. There is a moral message here. And coming back to the wedding gift, so we think that it was a gift to Henry III, and it went into his palace in Brussels. And so it served that purpose of delighting his audience. Like this is a masterful, kind of astonishing painting with the complexity and these fantastical creatures. So he could impress his company and his visitors in the palace. But then it also served perhaps a more personal message that the commissioner of this painting, the one who was giving it to Henry, as a symbol of his wedding vows, as more of a stern kind of warning about not giving way to fleshly temptations, or giving way to the temptation of lust, which is kind of the main point of this, or one of the points of this work. I should tell you too, just to give you some context for this work in the court of Henry III. There's another artist from the Northern Renaissance named Dürer, which you're probably familiar with Dürer. He passed on through the 1520s, I think, was a visitor of Henry's, and he mentions this painting, but then he also talks about the court. There was a meteorite in the garden. He said that was great, meteorite, and there was all kinds of secret passages in the court, and a giant bed that could sleep 50 people. So I think they were probably having a good time at the court of Henry III with Bosch's paintings in the background, maybe for some inspiration. Go. Oops. Oh, I forgot I included a photo. Here's Henry. Does he look like he needs some moral instruction? Be good, Henry. Yeah, so this is I'm just showing you a few close-ups, then we'll go in closer and closer. This is the left panel, the Garden of Paradise, Garden of Eden, central panel, and then the far left panel, Hell. So let's start with the closed shutters. I don't read this book. Get rid of it. I can't point with my book. So we have, this is painted in what's called grisaille. So it's common for the closed shutters, or when the altarpiece is closed, that it would be in kind of this monotone, so shades of gray, grisaille. And like I said, this is the third day of God's creation of the world. And we have a terrestrial disc with some, Bosch's God has some imagination here. So there are some strange land masses forming. And the terrestrial disc is situated within a globe, within a sphere. And at this point, on the third day, God was separating the land from the water. So what we have are the elements of the land emerging from the water, and they're solidifying. And there's also a bit about separating the darkness. Anyway, you can see the dark clouds kind of receding and forming and gaining shape in the sky. And keep these shapes in mind. They repeat on the inside of the panel. But there is some vegetation forming. And like I said, these kind of hollowed out, they look like large, they're large organic structures, like they're very kind of hollow vegetal spaces with some rocky outcrops over here. This is very small, it's hard to see, but God is very tiny in the upper left. And he's raising his hand. If you ever see a depiction of God with his hand up like this, that's the symbol in medieval and Renaissance artwork for God speaking. He's saying a thing, you should listen. And basically it's, so God said this should be, and it is basically what that Latin text says up there. So let's get to the good stuff. So we've opened the triptych now, and this is the far left-hand panel. And what we have are three figures in the foreground and the bottom third. There is a fountain, a pink fountain. I find this is a strange one, the fountain. We'll talk about his depictions of waterworks with a pond in the center, and then a mixture of animals. And you notice at the top, that same type of topographical features that popped up over here on the closed shutters. So there's a thematic connection. It's meant to be read from the closed panels, the closed shutters. You read this, and then it moves chronologically through time. But there are elements that he's picking up from one section to the other. So, in the center, we have Christ, looking good in a pink robe. And Adam is sitting up to his right. And Christ is presenting Adam with his wife, Eve. So if you recall from Sunday school, poor Adam was lonely, wanted a wife, wanted company. Here she is. Adam's looking pretty perky. He's not looking at Christ, he's looking at Eve. She's looking pretty good. Notice, I'll circle back to this, but just again notice that Adam is to the right of Christ and Eve is to the left, and Christ is grasping her by the wrist with his left hand. And this is very important. Everything in Bosch, every aspect of this painting would have been read by Bosch's. It all has meaning and a highly complex set of symbols and lexicon that would have been very familiar to his contemporaries. We can access some of it or most of it. We're still trying to bore into all of the depths of the complexities of this imagery. But something we do know, and this pops up again and again and again in the art historical tradition, art historical narrative, Christ is always, you want to be on the right-hand side of Christ. That's where the good stuff is. In depictions of the Last Judgment, Christ is always rising up the blessed to heaven with his right hand, and he's condemning the sinners to hell with his left hand. And again, the Latin dextra for right, and sinistra, sinister, sinistra for your left hand. Left is bad. And that's why kids were made to switch. There was kind of a moral, you were not morally, there were some moral issues if you were left-handed. So that's why children for so long were compelled to start writing with their right hand. So there was layers of negativity associated with anything on the left. Who's on the left? Eve. Oh, Eve, what a troublemaker. So in just this one particular scene, this is a previewing, or it's a precursor to what is going to follow in the other panels. So this is a warning for Adam to beware the temptations of the flesh, beware the temptation of Eve, and it's foreshadowing what is to come. And that, of course, Eve meets up with Satan, and she eats the apple, and gives it to Adam, and all kinds of things go wrong. Below Adam and Eve, there are a row of animals, and there's a circular pond. Ponds, again, maybe the round. I'm not sure exactly. There are all kinds of symbols that signify masculinity, and then there are symbols that signify femininity. A pond, that means feminine things. So symbols of fertility, again, maybe the round, I don't know. Anyway, pond is feminine, it's on the side of Eve. There's an array of some fantastical creatures, some creatures that do exist in reality, some do not. There are always great puns in Bosch. This is a monkfish, and it is a monk reading a book, a monkfish, with a fishy tail. So there's there's always lots of little visual puns you can find in Bosch's work. It's all very orderly and structured. The animals are in 2 rows here, below Adam and Eve. And if you recall from Genesis, God gives Adam and Eve dominion over all the living things on earth. And says, go forth and multiply, which doesn't work out so well, as we'll see in the next panel. This is, now how Bosch knew this, I'm not sure, but this is a dragon tree from the Canary Islands. Maybe it arrived on a boat in the Burgundian Netherlands, I'm not sure, but it's what's called the dragon tree. There are a bunch of special trees in the Garden of Eden. The tree of knowledge, of course, that's what gets everybody into trouble. The tree avoid the tree of knowledge. But this is the tree of love, the tree of self-sacrificing love. You notice there is a vine twirling its way up the tree with these strange leaves. And they're shaped like communion wafers. So Bosch is connecting the idea of the Eucharist, of the sacrificial, the blood of Christ with this scene. And here it's on a parallel with Christ. So there's a connection here, a symbolic connection that, again, his contemporary viewers would have known and realized. Then there's the fountain. This is really strange. So there really isn't a precedent for this in medieval and Renaissance art. Generally, the fountains, I mean, there are lots of fountains of paradise that pop up. That's whenever you have Eden, there's always a nice fountain. But it generally is connected in some way or inspired in some way by Gothic or Romanesque architecture, so it looks more architectural. But here, Bosch is lifting, it looks organic. And it's just strange, kind of floating spheres of bubbles and the water flowing. And this would have been read, the fountain again would have been read as a symbol of the Eucharist and a symbol for Christ and the life-giving kind of blood of Christ. And you'll notice that there is a connection between Christ and the fountain. They form this vertical axis. And again, there's symbolism that connects the two of them and foreshadowing the death of Christ, and that it is the water flowing from the fountain represents, like I said, the blood of Christ. At the bottom of the fountain, there's a collection of gems and stones, and that was, again, a kind of a traditional symbol for goodness and purity associated with the fountain. There is, though, the owl, the evil owl, in the center of the fountain in this kind of hollow disc in the shadow. And owls, I don't know, we kind of gradually, owls become something good, over time, the wise owl. Not so in the Renaissance. The owl was bad symbol. A symbol of kind of doom and death and avarice and malice, greed. Bad things come from owls, basically, is the message. And this takes the place of, there's one serpent over on the far right-hand side, but it takes the place, this is a satanic symbol. So it's a stand-in for the serpent, or the representation of Satan here in the garden. To the left of the fountain, there's a pool, and there's an array of hoofed animals grazing and drinking from the pool, including a white unicorn, which also means something bad. No, I'm kidding, it doesn't. It's always good. The unicorn is always a symbol of virginity, of purity, a very positive symbol here in the garden. On the right-hand side, well, to our left, on the right-hand side of Christ, again on the side where Adam is down here, these are all symbols of masculinity. The elephant is kind of a solid creature of steadfastness, traditionally associated with the masculine. So are the hoofed animals here. Now we have to talk about. Yeah, so the giraffe and the two-legged dog, we just don't know what those are. Unsurprisingly, giraffes don't show up that often in Renaissance paintings, so we don't know. Art historians think that probably the contemporaries of Bosch, who would have been seeing this painting in the 1500s, they probably could look at the giraffe and be like, oh yeah, the giraffe means this. But it's been lost to us over time. We have no textual reference for it. It's on the side with Eve, so it probably has something to do with femininity and the curve of the neck. But it's a stretch. Wild-looking giraffe. I have no idea. I sent the last time I was in France. We were at an art history bookstore, and they had these set of postcards, 25 postcards of the weirdest stuff from Bosch. And I sent one every day to Caleb here at the gallery, not here at their old gallery, every day, mostly because I wanted to drive the mailman crazy. Like, what is this? And I think he arrived with this one day with the postcard and he said, what is she doing? Yes. Oh, charming. So to the right of the fountain, there are some less positive symbols to be found on the right. And again, this is the side of Eve. So there's some trouble brewing on the right-hand side. There's rocky outcrop, which is fairly barren. And these amphibians and creatures are crawling out of the water, and they're leaving the pool. So the pool is associated with cleansing and purity. They're leaving the pool and coming out onto land. And this is a reference actually to where Adam is buried. His tomb is on Golgotha, and it's known as the place of the skull. And so there is a shape of a face here that Bosch has included. So here's the nose, and then the lips, and then the closed eye with eyelashes. So it forms this rather disturbing image of a skull, which is again foretelling the demise of Adam and his resting place on Golgotha. This pops up, if you keep an eye out for it, this image pops up in Dali's work. The surrealists love Bosch, they love Bosch. And so there's a painting, The Great Masturbator, I think, from Dali. Anyway, that has this, it's lifted directly from Bosch. There's the one serpent that pops up in this garden is slithering down the date tree here on the right. And the date tree is another special one, tree of life, I think, tree of life, the date tree. And then here's a detail from the far upper, or the upper portion of the panel with those strange land formations that we saw in the closed shutters. What I'd like you to there's closed shutters. What's important to notice about this particular panel is that everything, This is the pre-lapsarian world. So this is before the fall of Adam and Eve, before they've eaten of the tree of knowledge. And so there is order and harmony through Christ. So there is very cleared, tiered structure to this panel. And the aquatic animals stay with the aquatic animals. They stay in the pond. The land animals stay with the land animals. The birds flock together. Everybody is where they're supposed to be. There's a sense of clarity and harmony to this scene. And it's compositionally organized. I've alluded to the animals on the left being paired with the idea of the masculine, and the animals on the right being paired with the idea of the feminine. So everything is good. Everything is good in the Garden of Eden. There are a few dire warnings of things to come, but for the most part, everything is ordered in the way it should be. Not so in the center panel. So this is really where the name, the Garden of Earthly Delights, comes from. And just kind of something interesting to note, Bosch didn't give this work that title, the Garden of Earthly Delights. That was added to it later. It didn't really have a title. And almost like it's more appropriate to describe each panel as a separate. So this is the creation of Eve in the Garden of Eden, or this is the before the flood, humanity before the flood, and then the last panel is hell. So the Garden of Earthly Delights is a bit of a misnomer because it doesn't take in the full triptych and what's happening. So the structure that existed in the first panel is non-existent here. As you can tell, it's a far more chaotic scene. It is roughly divided. We have a foreground here with a melee of figures. There is a middle ground with people mounted on animals. And then again, the background with those same type of strange land masses and what looks like kind of some combination of land masses and architectural spaces. I would like to draw your attention to first this far right corner, because that's really the key to understanding this central panel. So let's take a look here. So can you see where we're going? This is a detail of this. I'm coming in on that. And what we have, there are three figures here. There's a female figure, the male figure, and then there's a face popping out here. And these are actually probably the three most, well, they're the protagonists of the story. So what we're seeing here, this is Adam and Eve. Adam is pointing it's her fault, pointing at Eve. Adam is always blameless, Adam. And then peeking over Adam's shoulder is Noah. And we can tell it's Noah. He's typically in he's wearing like a crown of wine leaves, not wine leaves, grape leaves. Wine leaves. He was those things. He was the first winemaker. So that's how he's kind of, you can pick out Noah from a scene. And this is what we're looking at in this overall panel is the time before the flood, and is when the descendants of Adam and Eve took too literally that instruction to go forth and multiply. There is actually scant reference to this period before the flood in the Bible. There's a bit in Genesis and there's a bit later in the New Testament. And they just talk, it's very brief, they talk about the wickedness of man, and that God then sent a flood and gave instructions to Noah to build an ark, and then the animals, and you all know the story. But there was a medieval tradition to expand on this narrative and to add some colorful details. So that's where we get the idea of what happened. Again, this is from medieval sources. What happened was that the good offspring of Adam and then his third son Seth. So again, if you recall from Sunday school, Cain and Abel fought it out. Cain killed the good one, Abel, so Cain is still alive. Adam has a third son, Seth. He's good. So the descendants of Seth are good. The descendants of Cain are bad. What happened before the flood, according to medieval sources, was that the good sons of Seth and Adam were tempted, lured by the wicked daughters of Cain, and they reproduced and formed a race of giants. Okay? Yes. Yes. So that actually there is a giant that appears in the hell panel, and I'll show you that. And so that's probably a reference to this race of giants. There are also dark-skinned figures, and they were shown as again, they were meant to be depictions of the descendants of Cain. So bad descendants from Cain was typically how they were depicted in Renaissance artwork. So it was a mark of infamy to be the descendants of Cain. So here the people who wrought this, right, brought this scene about are hiding in the hole in the far right. Noah is waiting to pop out and build his ark as all of the descendants of Adam and Eve fall into lust and debauchery. And what we have is this, it's a topsy-turvy world now. So he's pulling on that tradition of the hares then hunting the humans. Everything has been flipped. So we had that clear hierarchy in the first panel, that mankind was above the animals, in dominion of the animals. The animals were their right sizes. Everything is flipped. There are creatures that appear, they're enormous. They're giant blueberries, giant cherries. Basically everything here has some kind of sexual connotation. If you're looking at anything in the center panel and you're like, I wonder what that blackberry means. Sex. It means sex, okay? Or what does that shape mean? This cylindrical shape or this, basically anything in here can be linked back to lust. So let's look at a few details. Yes, okay, so, where to start? Yeah. Often the fruit is hollowed out, which unsurprisingly has a sexual reference, refers to female genitalia. If there are two cherries together, that refers to male genitalia. Some of it's not a leap. There are depictions of heterosexual and homosexual relations happening here. Although it's important to note in this and in the hell panel as well, in this central panel, there's no actual sexual engagement. So you can tell they had just had sex or they are about to have sex, but you don't actually see any sex happening here. And in hell, there's all kinds of torture that is happening or about to happen, but there are actually no graphic depictions of violence. I mean, kind of. There's people getting eaten and excreted by a giant crane, but it's non-graphic, if I can say that. Although this looks pretty graphic to me. Lots more owls in this center panel. So again, symbols of avarice and lust, evil. The idea of eating and overeating, like indulging, this idea of rife throughout this center panel is the idea of overindulgence, that humanity hasn't controlled itself, that we're giving way to temptation here. So we're overeating, we're indulging in the temptations of the flesh. So again, like it's sexually charged, but there are no actual sexual depictions here. the idea of the topsy-turvy world, that things have been flipped, that the size is the relationship between the natural order, that we are a certain size and animals are a certain size, has been flipped, so that the fruit is enlarged, but then also the animals are enlarged. We're tiny in comparison. This is on the left-hand side. Lots of birds with beaks and bills, male genitalia. Animals with horns, male genitalia. There are lots of people fitting into tight, hollow spaces, female genitalia. In the middle ground, there's a cavalcade of kind of debauched carnal partying going on. So they're having a good time on a range of creatures. Some we will not recognize with single antlers. There's some horses, but then there are also some fantastical creatures here as well. And they are circling around a group of naked women in a pond. So it's the men circling the pond, the masculine circling the feminine. And these all have certain meanings and certain sins associated with them, all of these type of animals, and it would have been read at the time. They could look and see, okay, the goat would represent this type of sin. Or I don't know what that is. The cat would represent this. So every detail, you could imagine again kind of the endless hours of engagement and delight and fascination that this would have within a princely court, that the viewers would be able to dissect, just like we're doing, dissect all of the little individual symbols, and they would have been so much better equipped to dissect it than we are. And here the circle continues. There are elements that Bosch picks up from that first panel, and then he flips it. He gives us the consequences of it. So we had the white unicorn, the symbol of virginity and purity, drinking at the pool. And here the unicorn has been pulled into this orgy and this party, and so it's been lured by temptation, lured by the. I keep getting distracted and losing myself. I'm like, look at that bear! There's a bear. Never noticed the bear before. I have no idea. I've looked at that before. I had my students. I taught an Introduction to Renaissance course at the university last year, and they said, "Why are their bottoms blue?" I don't know. I'm sure there's something. These structures and the fountain, they all, it's a precarious world. There's always this, in this central panel, the scene before the flood, there's a sense of things balancing, or like a bubble that's about to pop. So it's this sense of imminent danger of things are going to topple over and come to an end. They don't know. They're partying on. But there's this, the world is teetering. It's about to fall. So let's move on now to the far right-hand panel. This is hell. Oh, this is the good stuff. So it's once again divided into three sections. The foreground with the prince of hell munching on his sinners. I'll show you that in detail in a minute. The race of giants, we think, is this person, whatever he is, in the center. And then that city, again, the city on fire in the far upper section. Look at the detail, though. I mean, this would be tiny, tiny, right? Minuscule detail. And that's what the Northern Renaissance painters were famed for. Their attention to detail. But that's terrifying. The idea of a city on fire, with perpetually. I mean, I guess we're used to this idea of hell being a place of fire and brimstone, but there's something so terrifying about a city engulfed in flames. And this backlit, using to great effectiveness here, figures drowning in this pool, frantically trying to escape. It looks like Mordor. I mean, you can pull, there's so many, Bosch has such influence over generations. I mean, from Goya and then, yes, to Tolkien. And he was his gift to subsequent painters and writers for centuries. So let's move to the center. Art historians imaginatively call this the tree man. It's the tree man. In the center, he has oh boy, it's strange. He has a hollow abdomen with two kind of dead tree trunks as legs, and his feet are enclosed by these ships. And he's turning back. He's literally presenting to us his rear end. So there's scatological references here. So it's fairly base that we're looking into his rear end here as he's turning back to connect with the viewer. This type of scene comes up quite frequently, actually, in medieval and Renaissance images. It's the idea of the evil in, so that typically, men and women are pulled into sin, are lured by temptation at the inns. So this is where men go to gamble, where men and women go to drink, to hook up, the evil in. And it's symbolized by these bagpipes. Here's a bagpipe flag, come to the inn. There's also a set of bagpipes on the hat of the tree man. I say these sentences about Bosch. I'm like, oh my goodness, a hat of a bagpipe. Anyway, the bagpipes would have been commonly read as, once again, a symbol of lust and sexuality. And there's a strange parade of figures meandering around this disc, kind of a parody of what marriage should be, or what marriage. Again, think about the purity, or the symbol of the marriage between Adam and Eve, and then this strange combination of male and female figures here in this endless circling around the bagpipes on the hat of the tree man. Again and again in Bosch's depiction of hell, the figures are caught in this circle. They're caught in this eternal loop. Oh, here they are. So you can look right into the inn, group of figures eating and drinking. Would have been on a toad. Would have been a symbol, again, of a warning against the sin of gluttony and over drinking. There are in hell, in Bosch's hell, instruments pop up again and again. And these enormous ears that have been pierced by a knife. And Bosch is warning viewers about the temptations of the senses, that we're lured by music bad, the devil's music, right? That you go to the inn, you go to the evil inn to party. Bagpipes. Oh, they lead everybody astray. Those bagpipes. Nice little details. Just Bosch throwing it in there, make it extra painful. The drolleries again, and this Bosch being known as a creator of fantastical demons and fantastical creatures, and hell especially is rife with them here. And the idea that it's, again, this loop that sinners climb up into the tavern and come out the other side and down and make this eternal loop of sin. This is on the moving down the panel. So here we have, again, enlarged musical instruments. Not the good kind. This is the kind that would be at the inns. Those lutes. I think it's a lute, or the harp. Anyway, bad instruments. And the figure being tortured by the senses, being tortured by the instrument itself here. I'd like to draw your attention to this figure. One of the visitors to the court of Henry mentioned this figure especially. There's a bird eating a man, and then he excretes him into a puddle. So interesting. So this is a prince of hell, or demon of hell. And he's sitting on his throne here, and he's munching on the sinners, and yes, excreting them into a pool. Very good response, I think, here. Very apt. Notice too it's like the medieval tradition. He's tucking in, he tucks in demons and fantastical creatures into the smallest spaces. So you can look for days and find these little creatures and demons popping out. He has the central figures, but then there are often ones in the margins. This scene is showing the results of gambling. And so this is the kind of the aftermath of participating in the sins of the evil inn. So there's cards strewn about here, a woman with a dice on her head, a man being tortured here. There are these skewered hands holding the dice, and that was a common thought in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, that whatever part of the body committed the sin, the punishment should equate to or relate to that part of the body. So if it's a sin of gambling, that then your hand, or a sin of theft, you steal, you surrender your hand. The demons kind of cackling about, holding up these games, and the games then become instruments of torture. The killer rabbit popping up. There was a special place in hell reserved for members of the clergy and nuns who sinned or gave way to lust or debauchery, and so there are none like pig figures that pop up here and again, and either they've been transformed or they're being consumed in hell in some way, paying for their sins. So, coming back to the panel as a whole, as I said, Bosch is typically kind of colloquially known or popularly known as a painter of demons, and I played part of this. I lured you here with the idea of fornicating in strawberries. So I'm part of that, and I use this image all over the place to promote, like, come hear about Bosch and we'll do the tree man, and it'll be interesting. And look at hell, but like I said, there is a quite a complicated moral message here, warning the viewers of to avoid the temptations of lust and temptations of the flesh, and that if you do that, you can remain part of the orderly, harmonious world. And if you give way to the lure of the senses, this is where you'll go. Be good, Henry, I think is the message. We think the person who gave Henry III this as a wedding gift, that he had syphilis. So it's like, don't mess around, Henry. Be good. Stay true to your one person. Don't stay over here. Don't mess about. This is an art historian, Panofsky, who wrote back in the 50s. And I alluded to this when I was talking about the giraffe, that we know, we can tell some things, we can discover some things from contemporary writings, but we don't know everything. We can't quite unearth everything there is to know about Bosch. He's a very, very complicated artist and doesn't fit the mold of the other Renaissance artists at the time. So the Renaissance was about, and I talked about this during my Leonardo lecture last month, that the Renaissance, the artists of the Renaissance were interested in the idea of creating the illusion of space and depicting the world around them, and they discovered or rediscovered linear perspective. So it was about depicting the world around them, and Dürer actually warned artists, like, don't do crazy things, like show the world as it is. And Dürer said that if artists are creating these fantastical creatures, then that should belong to the realm of dreams. If you're painting dreams, then fine. And so Bosch was almost relegated. It was lowbrow. It's considered lowbrow art to base your work on grotesque and drolleries. And so he wasn't. I mean, he was popular, and people were interested in his work. Contemporaries interested in his work and collecting his work because of that kind of lowbrow fascination with the strangeness of his demons. But it took. I mean, it wasn't until a century after he died when Jose de Siguenza he looked at it a little more carefully. He's like, wait a minute, there is some moral messaging going on here. It's not just about nightmares or strange creatures from the depths of hell. There's a moralizing message that's being conveyed here. And we've been working, our historians have been working for really the last century, really, really activism and lots of research going into Bosch and trying to figure out the depth of the complexity of his work. Because what is so baffling for art historians as well is that with Bosch's work, some of the symbols and the images that pop up in his work are not depicted anywhere else. So there's no pictorial tradition for some of the things that he's doing. He's bringing something completely new, and then art historians have to then rifle back through the written text and figure out where is this coming from? What is his source for these images? So I told you that this triptych was in the collection of Henry III in Brussels for a period of time. It made its way to the collection of Philip II of Spain. And then it was gifted to the Prado, the big art museum in Madrid in 1939. And that's where you can see it today, at the Prado. And what I wanted to tell you too about Bosch, I've alluded to this as we've been going through, the depth of his impact on art history. And that's, I talked about this during the last lecture. It's like, how do we, as art historians, decide what artist gets attention, or what artist should we focus on? And often it's, is an artist doing something new? Are they contributing something to the art historical narrative? And then what is their subsequent impact? So what kind of influence do they have? And so Bosch ticks both of those boxes. And often, I mean, all of the artists that we looked at Leonardo, they're ticking both boxes. That he's doing something new and revelatory here. But then the impact of his work, I mean, think about artists like Goya and his depictions of hell. Like I said, I mentioned the surrealists and Salvador Dali literally pulling aspects from the Garden of Earthly Delights. To Lewis Carroll, I mean, strange kind of enlarging certain aspects of the world and shrinking other aspects. And the idea of the topsy-turvy, of things being flipped on their head, all relate back to Bosch. And that's it. Garden of Earthly Delights. Do you have questions before we wrap up? I can go back. We'll take one or two questions potentially. We're good? Oh, there's one question. Kevin, yeah.
Are those X-rays or under different wavelengths of light?
Oh, yes. That's so Kevin's question was, what are the images on the right? And yes, so the Garden of Earthly Delights has gone through some cleaning, some restoration. We talked about this with the Leonardo Adoration of the Magi last month, that there are restoration or conservation efforts, and often they're subjected, yes, to infrared scans and to see is there any kind of underpainting. So did Bosch, did he intend to do everything? How did he plan this? How did he execute this painting? And what actually art historians have discovered from these scans is that there was no plan. Bosch had no plan. Maybe unsurprisingly. He would just go at it and start filling up the scene. And I think you can certainly, I mean, I think there was probably some planning with the Paradise panel, but the other two, you can tell that it's almost like the figures kind of fit into the spaces. So that's why conservators and art historians use some X-rays and some of the scans to see. So when artists are doing a painting, when you're framing up a composition, you'll often sketch it on the canvas or on the panel, and then you see if it works, and then you make some changes, and then you start to paint, and then sometimes you scrape it off and paint it again. So it's kind of peering into the process of the painting. And then you can see too, well, did the artist did Bosch plan to do this? Was the tree man somewhere else? Like what changes were made? So you can really kind of get a glimpse into the artistic process of Bosch, which was helter-skelter. Yes, unsurprisingly. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, Kate.
I was just wondering if there was any theories or ideas around just like what was the source in him of just having what seemed to be an immense confidence and exuberance and like going your own way and his inventiveness. Like I guess
Yeah.
would there be letters or any writing?
We don't, there's not much. Yeah, so it's very, the question was about how do we know, what can we infer, what can we tell, or what record there is there about Bosch and his life? Like how did he have the confidence to create this work, or where did the visions come from? Is that kind of the gist of your question, Kate?
Yeah, like how did he just have the chutzpah to do that?
Yeah. So no, unlike an artist, say like Leonardo or Michelangelo, there isn't a large written record of, we don't know that much about Bosch. So we just have to kind of cobble together what we can about his life. So he does pop up, say we have his marriage record, so we know who he married. He was a member of a kind of an elite sort of ecclesiastical society where he probably made some connections, and it was kind of a learned society, so he probably had access to a lot of these manuscripts where he pulled some of his inspiration as references. But no, like we don't, and that's why it's so tempting, I think, for art historians or for the general public to posit their own ideas, or his contemporaries, like, who is this person? How is he coming up with things? So, because they are, I mean, it's a strange, fantastical lexicon that he employs. But there would have been, the Gothic tradition, the inventiveness of Gothic artists, so in the period that came, the Middle Ages, that came right before Bosch. So Bosch is part of the Renaissance, the Middle Ages come first. The Gothic tradition is full of drolleries and grotesques. So just by looking at the Gothic architecture around him and the cathedrals within the Netherlands, and then the medieval texts, there would have been, he wasn't the first one to come up with strange creatures. There was a tradition of that, yeah. But it was so tempting. I mean, just like, who is this person? Why was he able to? Dan Brown's going to get his hands on Bosch, so that's coming. Oh, yeah, because it's so normal. It's just a normal step to start to see patterns and symbols, and what does this mean, and where did he get this from? So that's hence the idea that Lamsonius had, that, oh, well, Bosch must commune with the demons, right, to come up with that. But as far as we can tell, no, he was just a brilliant inventor of these fantastical visions. Great, yeah, maybe one more question. Perfect.
You said that he was really prolific and really popular
Mm-hmm.
during his lifetime.
Yeah.
But in fact, there are very few
Yes.
in existence now.
Yes. So we don't know about, I'm not so sure about prolific. We know that he worked and had an active studio and had apprentices and had a large following. But prolific, there aren't that many paintings, like 15 to 20 paintings survive. But again, artists would have worked on something like this for a number of years. Like this isn't, the commissioner would have given Bosch a number of years to complete this work. I mean, yeah, some of them have been lost. The same thing again, there's no kind of written record as far as we know. So yeah, just lost. Yeah. But he was, like I said, his work was quickly disseminated throughout Europe. So those works that he did complete kind of filtered through. They didn't just stay within the Burgundian Empire. He was very popular. There were many copies of this. So there would have been artists copying it, and then that would have been distributed as drawings and prints throughout Europe. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, everyone. We will, thank you.